Hey guys, Jim here. Welcome into Guest Blade episode number 11. It's kind of surprising how quickly we're getting up in those double-digit numbers. Next thing you know, we're going to be at 15, then 20, and then, God, who knows how far from there. I want to thank you guys again for participating as much as you have been. It's been a fantastic ride. We've been having a lot of fun bringing out some very unique knives out here under my lens, things that I myself and most of you at home wouldn't have the opportunity to get in our hands. And here is one such knife. This is actually, I categorize it as a vintage knife. Now, I'm sure the purists out there that deal with vintage knives have a certain age cut-off date where you can or cannot call it vintage. And I apologize if I don't know that. I'm just not into vintage knives at all. But this was manufactured somewhere in the late 80s to early 90s from the best that we can kind of figure out. Let's talk about who gave this beautiful knife up first. This was actually quite a surprise. This is not just any run-of-the-mill collector and subscriber that sent it in. This is my friend Eugene, who you guys know as the owner and co-founder of Olamic Cutlery. Now, while this may not be one of the knives that he makes, it is something from his personal collection. And he's kind of the collector that likes to get into really offbeat, different, maybe even wacky kind of knives. Just, kind of out-of-the-box kind of knives, things that you wouldn't typically see. And I think this is exemplary of that type of collection, because this is the kind of knife that you don't really see, that's not really available out there, and it's got some unique characteristics to it. So what we're looking at here is a Randall Gilbreath. See if we can get that to focus. There we go. Randall Gilbreath. It's a pretty large knife. It's a kind of an awkward knife, to say the least. It is beautifully made. It's got just about maybe a touch over a 4-inch blade on there. So it's a good sized knife in the hand. And what you're looking at here, before we get into all the crazy specifics, is titanium frame, titanium overlay done in an orange peel finish and then anodized to a teal, and then genuine mother of pearl overlay toward the backside of the knife. And Eugene did go over to a jeweler and have this verified as being genuine mother of pearl. So there is going to be some pretty good expense to that. It's unique in a lot of different ways. With the deployment methods, you have this really huge thumb stud that rides up very far back on the blade. And you see the way that's been made. There's actually a fair amount of checkering on there. It gives you a nice degree of purchase. And I guess the more you open it, the more you get used to it, the easier it is. I know the first time I tried it, I tried and I couldn't quite get it in one stroke. That's what she said. So it took multiple strokes of that thumb stud to be able to do it. And it does have a flipper of sorts, but it's obviously not going to be like a modern day flipper where you hit that and the blade flies open. It's more of an assist than anything else. So it allows the blade to get out to a position where you can then grab the thumb studs from the top with your forefinger. Now, this dates back to a time when flippers were not prevalent in the knife industry. And there has been some speculation back and forth for a lot of years as to who the originator of the flipper was. Most everybody, myself included, always believed that it was Kit Carson, because he was the first to really be credited, that we all kind of read about as making that. But Kit Carson himself made a post on the internet in around 2004. It says he credits Gilbreath with helping him out with doing his flippers. He was making them, had quite a few in his brochure, and he guesses that he actually learned from Mel Pardue on how to do the flippers. So now we're kind of going back to maybe as far back as Mel Pardue. But again, it's kind of that muddy area. It's hard to figure out. A lot of people say that Gilbreath was the very first. So, there's all this speculation as to who did what first. But the point being, this is one of the first makers to get into making a flipper and popularizing it. Kit Carson is really the one that seemed to have popularized it. The blade steel we're assuming is ATS 34, which would be a very good blade steel. It's going to hold an edge fairly decently, going to have pretty good corrosion resistance. It's not going to be great for, this isn't the type of knife for it, but that steel is not the type for hacking or anything else, because you're going to ding, you're going to dent, you're going to chip, you're going to roll that edge. And as you see, he's got a very fine satin finish going throughout the entire blade. And this is really quite a beautiful grind when you get down and look at it. You get past the pimpy look of the handle and just look at the beauty of that blade. And it really is ground very, very nicely. And again, this predates knife makers using CNCs and water jet and everything else. This was, one piece of bar stock that was ground by hand. And, it almost seems like that's a dying art these days. We look at so many of the makers, and there's nothing wrong with it, but there's so many of the makers now that, start pre-shaping their blades and even doing the primary bevels on a CNC. And again, I'm not knocking that in any way, but it really is nice to hold a piece of art in your hands from this era where that type of technology really hadn't emerged yet in knife making. And you look at some of the other touches that have been done here that are still being done to this day that are still very, very popular. You look at the purple anodized titanium there that's been jeweled, very nicely jeweled. That you will see in some very high-end knives today. You see the orange peel finish on this titanium overlay. Did a very nice job on that too. I used to not be such a fan of orange peel finish until I got, I don't know where it went to. Yeah, here it is. Until I got my R.J. Martin, and I've got the orange peel on my bolsters. So, and again, this is what, today's modern flipper is going to act like, or at least on a really high-end flipper. Maybe it's kind of unfair to put it up against the king of flippers, but, it's seeing this kind of workmanship, this hand craftsmanship, and you look at the precision in which these overlays were cut. Again, this is predating throwing things into a CNC. So this was all cut. It could have been, any number of tools being used, but this was all done by hand. And mother of pearl is a very tricky material to work with because it's very brittle. This is actually a very thick piece, or two very thick pieces of mother of pearl. But it's a very, very delicate material that as you're cutting it, it can chip. It can chip and start flaking. It can shatter. It can crack. So it's very, very difficult. And what we're looking at here is what's called presentation grade mother of pearl. And this is something I have experience in with, obviously, with watches. We don't need to go up to presentation grade when we make a watch, because presentation grade means the same thing as grade A and double A would mean up until the last part I'm going to mention. It's going to be flawless, free of any defects, cracks, veins, or other imperfections, and it's going to have a perfectly smooth top surface. Now, presentation grade would mean that both sides of the material would be a completely smooth surface, and obviously for a watch dial you wouldn't need that. So this is going to be presentation grade mother of pearl, and everything was edged and polished perfectly. It's nice and smooth, beautifully done. He does a nice job shaping it. I like how he did keep the purple titanium frame a nice bit of size out from the overlay, so you really get a chance to see it all the way around. See that beautiful jeweling. Great craftsmanship throughout. We'll go to flip it again. Get that thing open. It locks open very solidly. There is your purple anodized titanium liner lock. Everything about this knife is very, very solid. I'm not a big fan of art knives, but I certainly am gaining an appreciation for the amount of work put in them. You see the jeweling on the inside of the titanium there as well. And, you know, I see myself at some point in the future probably getting into a few art knives in my collection. Right now, I'm of the frame of mind that every knife that I own should be a knife that I would carry and actually use, whether it be, you know, in some tactical defensive scenario or just everyday cutting tasks, cutting open a piece of fruit, cutting open a box, chopping into something, you know, that type of thing. I feel it needs to have some sort of use to be in my personal collection, but I do certainly see where people really, really can get out of hand collecting these art knives because they are so beautiful. They are using such exotic materials. And I don't know of anybody making an art knife that isn't hand-built. So as far as I know, when you get into the art knife sector, you are buying into hand-built custom knives at that point. And the least expensive that I've seen that I've found an appreciation for them, there may be lesser expensive ones out there, and there certainly are going to be by no name some of those Thai knife makers and whatnot. But of any decent name that seems to be fairly affordable, beautiful materials, beautiful craftsmanship, is Corey Schumann. And I would love to get a Corey Schumann if the man would just start putting pocket clips on his knives. Again, art knives really aren't made to be carried and not made to be used, but I would love to carry one of those. He did one a few years back with Gibeon meteorite and blacklit pearl and beautiful anodized work, and it was just amazingly beautiful. And I think it was all of $650 with those materials. But no pocket clip, so it didn't do me any good. And I wasn't going to go drilling into meteorite to attach, you know, a generic spring clip I get from, you know, whatever, knife supply online. So what you're looking at is something that may not be a functional piece for you in today's world. But before the EDC pocket knife really got popularized, where we clip it into our pocket and head out for our day, this was the kind of knife a lot of people aspired to. I mean, this is back in the day when you carried a Schrade or you carried a Buck 110 in a leather pouch with a giant snap on it on your belt. You know, so nobody minded that. Or you carried a nail flicker inside of your pocket, way down deep with your car keys and your pocket change. And now I think our needs may have evolved a little bit, but I think there's still something to be said for the beauty and the craftsmanship that goes into making a knife like this. And I don't know if this was or still is a very valuable knife, if it's a very expensive knife, but just by the smooth operation, the nice solid lockup, I can tell you that this was made with a high degree of quality. You know, it may have sold for $300 back then, which actually back then that would have been actually quite a bit of money. It could be worth $300 today. It could be worth $3,000. I have no idea. All I can say is it is beautifully crafted, nicely balanced when you've got it in the hand. And he uses some really nice high-end materials with nice finishing on everything. He didn't ignore anything. He didn't just throw titanium on here and then put mother of pearl on it, screw it together, and send it out the door. He did the orange peel. He did the anodizing, anodized here, did the beautiful jeweling. He finished the mother of pearl perfectly. The satin finish on the blade, the beautiful grinds. This was just a well-thought-out, well-conceived knife. I can tell you right now, if I had been at the level of collecting I'm at now, back in whenever this may have been made, let's say it was 1988, I would probably have wanted to have this in my collection, that's for damn sure. So anyway, there is a quick look at it, one of my shorter guest blades, but there's not a hell of a lot I can really talk about because there's no practical purpose in most people's lives for it. Especially an over 4-inch blade that sits down in your pocket without a pocket clip. But I want to thank Eugene for sharing this beauty with me and sharing it with all of you. Very, very generous of him. I will be hopefully updating within the next year my experiences with Eugene's knives personally, because I am on his list for the Wayfarer. For those of you that have not checked out Olamic Cutlery, Olamic is about bringing absolute beauty to primarily fixed blade knives, and he makes you know, every kind of knife that you can imagine. If you want a good knife to take out on your outdoorsy hunting and fishing expeditions, you can certainly do that. And he goes all the way up into presentation grade collector's knives that you're going to pay thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to get your hands on. Absolutely gorgeous Damascus work. Go check out their website. Look at the amount of detail that Eugene puts into each and every single knife they make. And they've made a recent change and added to that collection. They've added folders. They have one standard folder and one flipper. And I'm getting the Wayfarer, which is the flipper, on the next run that he does, which should be in a few months or sometime in the next year. Very excited about that. And he works with pretty much any material you can think of. And I mean, anything. I've seen him do crazy shit. He made one for Bob, Good Climbing, that I kind of joke with him and I say I'm not even going to say it. It's a patchwork of a bunch of different materials that creates probably the most unique look I've ever seen. The joke I had made was making a comparison to Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I've never seen that many materials on one knife. And the thing is, it's smooth and seamless and flawless, and Bob loves the hell out of it because Bob loves great quality. So if you're a fan of great quality, check out his website. See if you can get on his books or on a notification list for the future, and see what kind of goodies he can make up for you, because he's a very talented guy and one hell of a nice guy as well. And you guys know me, that goes a very long way in my book. All right, guys, we're going to cut it off here at just under 17 minutes. Thank you for watching as always, and there are more guest blades on the way. The very next one should be, if I'm not mistaken, it should arrive first, will be a Recenti Snafu. Oh, so get ready for that. I'll see you guys later.